In this video, we're going to have a look at the rest of question 2 that you started in the previous video along with question 1. If you remember where we left off, you had identified how Zoe, the protagonist, was feeling throughout the little extract of text that you can see up at the top left corner of the screen. And you'd also identified some of the writer's methods so that you're now in a position to have a look at some answers, looking at that question of how does the writer use language to describe Zoe's feelings. Now, what the exam board have done is they've really helpfully produced some example answers. These are not complete answers, they are extract from answers. So don't use these to give you an indication of the length of what you should be writing. They are an indication of the quality. So, for example, on the screen at the moment, this is the lowest level of the mark scheme. And this would get you 1 to 2 marks out of 8. And they're still looking for 3 skills, but at this level, they're looking for really simple awareness of the use of language. So they've highlighted in purple any comment on the effect of language. In the pale blue, that's the reference or textual detail. So that's your quotation, your evidence. And then in the orange, that's where you're showing that you understand writer's methods. So that's where you'll use your subject terminology. And even for 1 to 2 marks, they are expecting that to be used mainly appropriately. So if you have a little look at the example, it says, everywhere there was snow and silence, snow and silence. So the words are repeated to make it seem like she really liked the snow and she liked how quiet it was. So the reason that gets a mark of 1 to 2 is that it's got a quotation in there and it's a relevant quotation. So everywhere there was snow and silence, snow and silence. The terminology that's used is repeated. So the fact that there's repetition, that the candidate has identified that accurately. And then they've attempted to explain the effect, but it's quite straightforward. They've just said, well, it means that she likes the snow and she likes how quiet it was. So they haven't really explained maybe how the reader is positioned to perceive this, or how it conveys Zoe's emotions really effectively. They haven't actually identified Zoe's emotions, which goes back to my point earlier about how that really helped lift people's answers if they identified those. So that one got 1 to 2 marks. This one here gets 3 to 4. So what we're looking for here is some understanding. So it's a higher level of skill that's being shown here. So there'll be an attempt to comment on the effect of language. That's purple. And again, you'll notice that the purple bit starts to become the longest part of the answer because that's where the explanation comes in. The quotation, again, the textual detail is in pale blue. And then the terminology that's being used is in orange. So in this answer, the repetition of snow and silence, and the writer's use of alliteration emphasise that Zoe felt happy. So there we've got the emotion of the protagonist, Zoe. So she felt happy to be surrounded by the whiteness of the snow, even if it was cold. The repetition, so that terminology being used accurately there, of silence, makes it seem like she also enjoyed the peace and quiet in the mountains. So there is some understanding there at a straightforward level. The terminology has been used accurately, the quotation is relevant, and there's an explanation that shows that Zoe's feeling happy and that she was enjoying her environment. Okay, so let's see how that can be improved upon even further. So at level 3, to get 5 or 6 marks out of 8, this is where your answer must be clear and relevant, and it must explain. And that's the difference. You're not just showing some understanding, you are explaining clearly at this level. So again, the purple is where you explain clearly the effects of the writer's choice of language. Again, that's the longest bit of your answer. So remember, we use what, how, why. That's the why bit. The blue is showing your the quotation, and then the orange is showing the how, the terminology. So the writer describes Zoe's joy and satisfaction. So straight away, this candidate has identified Zoe's emotion, and that's why this is a stronger answer. So the writer describes Zoe's joy and satisfaction at the moment she realises that everywhere was snow and silence, snow and silence. Using everywhere shows that Zoe feels she is surrounded by nothing except pure whiteness and complete quiet. With the repetition and alliteration, so we've now got terminology being used accurately, emphasising how breathtaking she finds it. So you can see how much more detailed this answer is in terms of understanding Zoe's emotions. Yes, she's happy, but we've got words like joy, satisfaction, breathtaking. There's a much clearer understanding of how this character feels and how the language shows that. The metaphor, the complete arrest of life. So that idea that it's as if the whole world has just paused, it's stopped, suggests that Zoe feels that she and the world around her have stopped dead. There is nothing but the snow and the stillness. Okay, so there's a real understanding there of Zoe's feelings, but also how the writer achieves that, the methods that are being used. Some of you in your answers talked about, when you talked about death and the arrest of life, you talked about that being negative and showing her fear. It's not. That's a misinterpretation. It's the stillness here that's so exhilarating for her. It's that clarity. It's that tranquility. So just be careful. That's what I mean earlier about recognizing the use of language in the context of the text as a whole, not just digging into a word or an idea without thinking about what it means specifically in this text. Okay, and then the top band, so marks 7 to 8, this is where we're looking at the response being much more perceptive and much more detailed. So again, we've got our what, how, why characteristics highlighted, the why in purple, and this time we're looking for real analysis of the effects. Not just explaining them clearly, analysing them, exploring them. The evidence that's chosen, it always refers to it as a range, so the idea that we've got more, there's quite a lot here in terms of quotation, but that the choice is judicious, it's really well chosen. There's a precise reason for referring to that specific piece of text. And in the orange, the how, this is where the terminology now has to be sophisticated as well as accurate. So let's have a look at what this person has written. Again, this is not a complete response. This is an extract from a response. The writer presents a linked image. Now that, even though that's very straightforward terminology, a linked image is terminology, and it's recognising that idea of an extended metaphor throughout the text. So the writer presents a linked image starting with the alliterative snow and silence, through to the extended metaphor of a complete arrest of life and a rehearsal and a pre-echo of death to describe Zoe's feelings. The repetition of the words snow and silence and the use of everywhere suggests that she feels at one with the surrounding expanse of unspoiled whiteness. Look at how much more precise the analysis of Zoe's feelings are. It's not just that she's happy in this lovely snowy place. She feels at one with the surrounding expanse of unspoiled whiteness. The feeling of absolute purity and stillness is described as a complete arrest of life, a metaphor. So again, that sophisticated terminology, a metaphor for Zoe's feeling of moving from the natural world to the spiritual world, where life has been stopped as if dead. And again, it's not the idea of this being an oppressive or intimidating place. It's the idea of it being almost freeing, because it's just so still, it's so silent, it's so exhilarating. So you can see there the qualities of a top band response. Now that you've seen some examples from the exam board, I want you to have the opportunity to put this into practice and do some of your own what, how, why. So I've done a grid for you, and this is in the Firefly page. It's also in the booklet for you at the top of the page. So you're very welcome to do this on paper or on the documents that are provided for you there. They relate to the text, the same little extract that we've been looking at, and you've got the heading, you've got some examples of evidence there. So the first one is done for you. So I've chosen I am an eagle, and you're going to work through what, how and why, and there's some little prompt questions there to help you improve the quality of your answer. So remember in the what part to focus on Zoe's feelings. That's what this question is about, so make sure you refer to that. When you're analysing how, make sure you are referring accurately to the writer's methods and using that terminology precisely. And then when you do the why section, you need to think about how is the reader positioned, and consider the context of the extract in the whole text. So with I am an eagle, the what part of that is the writer conveys Zoe's feelings of power and supremacy. So those are her feelings. She feels powerful. So the writer conveys Zoe's feelings of power and supremacy by showing her internal thoughts. The narrative, this is the how section now, the narrative switches from the third to the first person to reveal her confidence using the declarative I am an eagle. This metaphorically conveys her power, associating her strength and affinity with nature with the powerful bird of prey. Now, hopefully you're recognising these methods as the ones that you identified earlier in the grid, so that was designed to help you do this. So if you're not sure about which methods to talk about, go back and look at that grid. And then in the why section, the reader is positioned to recognise her heightened sense of assuredness. In this moment of still reflection, she celebrates her life. This energy and vitality is then threatened by the avalanche. So even though the avalanche doesn't appear in this extract, that moment of her saying, I am an eagle, is particularly powerful given what happens to her next. So show that you can see that. The next two are incomplete. So what I'd like you to have a go at doing is to complete the examples that are on there, and then have a go at doing another one completely independently. So the mountain breathed back at her. So think about, well, how does that show she feels? Again, maybe thinking about the relationship between her and the mountain, that sense of affinity with nature, being at one. And consider how important this moment of stillness is given what happens next. Identify the writer's method. Again, remember what we said earlier about the mountain breathing back and how mountains don't breathe. So go back to that grid of writer's methods and help yourself find that. And then why? How are we positioned to see this? Consider her relationship with nature at this moment, but then think about how that changes. And then the last one to have a go at is with the quotation, silence, arrest of life, pre-echo of death. So notice how those quotations have been selected, and the use of ellipsis to link them together there. So again, how does she feel? Think about that stillness. Not in a threatening way, remember. This is about her feeling just that moment of complete calmness, complete being at one with nature. Think about how those words link together and what we call that when words link together have a similar theme. And then think about the why. Whilst this is a moment of silence, how does that language foreshadow what is about to happen to her? Okay, so pause the video while you have a go at completing that grid. Okay, you've now completed questions 1 and 2 of the reading paper. So in a second, if you go on to the next video, and we'll have a look at question 3. Thank you.